Hi, I'm Tom Luna. I'm a former school board member. I was privileged to serve as senior advisor to U.S. Secretary of Education Rod Page. I also had the honor of serving for 8 years as Idaho State Superintendent of Public Instruction. During that time, I also served as president of the Council of Chief State School Officers. One thing I have learned in all these experiences is that educating children is not rocket science, it's more complicated. On my podcast, Swimming Upstream, we will visit with courageous leaders who challenge the prevailing tide and inspire all of us to swim against the current. Let's jump in. Welcome back to another episode of Swimming Upstream. I'm your host, Tom Luna, and we're here at the Excel in Ed conference in Oklahoma City, and this gives us a chance to meet and visit with education leaders from across the country. And today we have a good friend of mine, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but Carissa Miller is here. She's the Executive Director of CCSSO, the Chief Council of State School Officers. Is that close?
Should I try again? So
do it.
Council of Chief State School Officers.
There you go, CCSSO.
Yes.
But thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Carissa.
Anything for you, Tom.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. But let's let's talk about why we joke. Our history goes back a long ways.
It does.
And when I was first elected state superintendent, I remember you interviewed me to see if you wanted to go to work with us in Idaho.
Yeah, I was 2 years into your first administration, but we had actually met when I worked at the State Board of Education, and you were on the task force to put accountability systems into place and No Child Left Behind. We'd met then, and I was working over at Boise State, and Lucy called me and said, "Hey, do you want to come work for Tom Luna?" And I said, "Well, I'll come in and talk to him, but I had a list of questions for you." It was supposed to be an interview for me, I think.
Yeah, it was quite an interview. I remember the questions, but you came on board.
I did.
You were deputy superintendent there. We worked together for many years, and
we did. Just
appreciate the friendship and the good things we got done under your leadership. When it came to a number of things, and then the role you played when it came to developing assessments, for any number of different needs. So.
Yeah, we started it again back at the state board when we were one of the first states to have online testing. Idaho apparently doesn't do anything slowly. It was like the first year we kind of thought about it, and the second year we're all in. Everybody goes in. We published a list of those who didn't do it, and then we took it from there. We started to look at ways in which feedback could be given back to schools and students much more rapidly, and really took a leading edge on that. So.
And then you left Idaho, the beautiful state, and took the position as the executive director. Or you ended up as the executive director after being the assistant executive director at CCSSO. And go ahead.
Yeah, so I left, and it was a very sad time because I didn't want to necessarily leave Idaho. I really appreciate the state and appreciate a lot of what I learned there under your leadership, for sure. But went on to be the deputy at CCSSO, and then after 5 years, had now moved into the CEO role.
Yeah.
So.
And you've been the CEO for?
Almost 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about CCSSO, and specifically. You mentioned that it's a nonprofit, but this is an organization made up of state chiefs from all 50 states. So you've got a lot of diversity there when it comes to some are elected, some are appointed. Some are appointed by governors, some are appointed by state boards, and a lot of different political leanings and stuff.
That's right.
And since you've been at CCSSO, how many different administrations have you worked with in the White House?
I think it's been 4 now.
Yeah.
So, we cross over from, we're a nonpartisan organization, so we don't really have a stake in who's in the administration, and we'll work with whomever. Our goal is to make sure that education is moving forward for kids, and I think that's how we come to do that with state chiefs who come from both parties. Some are not affiliated with the party, but we come together around the things that we believe in, the things that we're for. And I think that makes a difference. When you look at the things you're against, you can put yourself in different camps, but if you look at the thing you're for and agree that maybe there are different pathways to get there, you can find common ground.
Yeah. And so we're taping this now just a week after the most recent election. There's going to be another change in administration. We don't know who the next Secretary of Education will be, but talk about that transition, and then how you manage that with this goal, like you said, of keeping everybody focused on what we agree on.
Yeah, we have a pretty typical kind of way in which we engage with the transition team. We have a list of priorities that we've sent to the transition team. Those things don't change based on the administration. They are written because of the membership and what our chiefs believe in and what they believe they need. And so, we'll operate exactly the same way. We'll welcome the opportunity to work with whomever becomes the next Secretary of Education or whoever in the Trump administration is going to lead education.
Yeah, and then I think the evidence of the value of CCSSO and the fact that it's viewed as this organization that is nonpartisan but focused on what the state chiefs collectively think is an important issue that they can all agree on, is a number of times that Congress and the executive branch leans on CCSSO either for testimony in meetings or your participation in important decision-making groups that will affect the direction of education going forward.
Yeah, we really try to keep a very open line of communication, and that requires being very open to both parties, because parties switch, like in the Senate and the House. You have to make sure that you have good lines of communication and understanding of some of the priorities, but also being a source of information and facts.
Yeah. So let's shift gears and let's talk about some of those things that CCSSO is focused on. And teachers has always been something at the forefront. What are some of the things that CCSSO is working on with state leaders in helping to address issues like teacher shortage, retention, teacher quality?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of nuanced ways, but one that I'll just punctuate for today is the teacher apprenticeship work. So what we've seen over the last year or two is that there are about 42 states that have registered teacher apprenticeships, and there's a varying level of implementation of that. And so, as an organization, that's one of the things that we like to help do, is implement the policy. And so we're trying to find a way to help support some of our states in implementing the teacher apprenticeship work.
And the apprenticeship focuses on once a teacher's like in their first year of in the classroom type experience and having access to mentors.
It could be a various ways. So this is, again, the beauty of CCSSO is like one state may do it one way and another state may do it another way.
And then we all learn from each other.
Right. And one state may use a university partner, another state may use Western governors, or they may use a third-party provider, or they may find ways to do the training inside of their own district. There are a variety of ways to get to the same goal, but keeping that bar of quality, I think, is something that we all agree on.
Yeah. So you were in office and from the beginning to the end of the pandemic.
Yes.
We could talk about any number of things that happened during that, but one of the things that is just now coming to an end is the amount of money that came through to education agencies, whether at the local, the LEA level or the SEA level. And talk about your work in helping to, I guess, track that and provide guidance and direction for how those dollars can best be spent.
Yeah. I will tell you an interesting story, which is that was about a year and a half into my tenure of taking over CCSSO. And I spent a lot of time worrying about whether I was doing it right or the way I was doing it before somebody who became before me. And I realized at that point, nobody's been through this before.
That's right.
So there really wasn't a wrong answer on that one. And so I was really proud of CCSSO for stepping up. We put together a framework. We had 4 key components for that. We helped states gear up for that. We started doing daily calls because the information was changing on an hourly basis in those first few months. And so we really played a pivotal role in that. But as the 3 tranches of ESSER funding has come out, and that totaled $190 billion. $19 billion of that went to states specifically, and we tracked that over time to be able to show how it was spent. And so what I can tell you is, and it's out on our website, ccsso.org, you can look at the COVID Data Relief Project, where we have tracked all of this information. $4.4 billion was invested in tutoring and accelerated learning, and $3 billion of it was invested in out-of-school learning and after-school programs. But what we're seeing now, so we're starting to see some of the test results come out of states, is that the high-impact tutoring has made some of the biggest difference. We're seeing in states like Illinois, Colorado, and Tennessee that they've seen some of the biggest increases in their perseverance around that. So, the project we're working on now, because as of September, all the money had to be obligated.
Yeah.
About another 6 months to finish spending that, is the investment in programs that will show advancement and maybe re-looking back at the things that didn't, so that, a lesser pool of money, but investing in like high-dosage tutoring or programs like that.
So did the high-dosage tutoring, for example, are these the results we're seeing for the high-dosage tutoring that was offered during the pandemic or afterwards when we were trying to then recover the loss
it was
of learning?
Throughout. I mean, I think that first year, the first set of ESSER money, what we saw is it was being spent on things like masks and cleaning supplies and keeping desks apart and all of that. It was really, in that moment. The next two sets is where we saw the spending go towards the academic achievement measures.
And we'll have more information as that becomes available. And, I think the kind of information you're going to provide, I'm assuming every state chief is anticipating answering some questions about how this money was spent at the local level and at the state level and what kind of results we're seeing. And it will give us an opportunity to identify things that worked.
Yep.
Then we can do more of that.
Yeah.
And those things that didn't work, and we know the changes we need to make there.
We, again, out on our website, we had a coalition of 12 organizations in DC that looked at all of the ways that the ESSER money was spent and illustrated bright spots. We just released 3 different videos highlighting some of that work. For example, in Minnesota, some of the work that they've done for credit recovery, and they're using an outdoor program. They're continuing that, even though they started it during the pandemic. Nevada has a teacher program that they started during the pandemic, and that they'll be continuing. And again, those are all out on our website to illustrate how the money had been spent.
Great. Let's talk about math. A lot of focus
Sure,
recently.
let's talk about math.
A lot of focus, and rightfully so, the last few years on the science of reading. We see more and more conversations now about the fact that math is also, and always has been, a challenge and an issue, and CCSSO is beginning to focus in that area with more intentionality. So
yeah. Well, let's take a walk back to literacy first, because in 2020 we hosted this literacy summit. That was January of 2020.
Just before.
Just before. We were gearing up. We were ready to roll on that. And during that time, we saw about 17 states have some kind of literacy policy. We know today that all 50 states, DC, Puerto Rico, and American Samoa, have some kind of policy or plan in place for evidence-based literacy. So we know what the power of a state vision can do. And so, I've been really heartened to be here and hearing about the work around the policies that Excellent Ed is working on around math. We just released a document called A Nation of Problem Solvers. And it's 6 actions for implementation of math policy. We went back and looked at the 2008 math panel, the National Math Panel, that came out with key things that were going to improve math education. And we know that a lot of people worked on improving those things. Pandemic was a setback, but we think it's time to redouble our efforts and move forward on that.
What are a couple of those recommendations?
Yeah. I knew you were going to ask me that, so I had to write them down. Well, I mean, the biggest one is the high-quality instructional materials, like being foundational and having high-quality instructional materials for students. We run a network of 15 states that have been implementing high-quality instructional materials for now 6 years. Then having the professional development partnered with that. And this is the key thing, is that making sure that teachers aren't just given the materials, but that they have the professional development along with it. Streamlining assessments. It's early access to advanced math. We heard that earlier today too. Yeah. And then this aligning state agencies around this. We had a lot of focus around math when we were in Idaho.
The math initiative and stuff like that. Yeah, you're right. So all of these things you're focusing on, you have a pandemic that you went through, you're coming out of. the focus on reading and math has always been important.
It has.
And then all of a sudden this thing called AI and ChatGPT surfaces.
I know.
In my world, at least, completely unprepared, right? When it just kind of sprung. So
nothing will make you feel older than like AI. I think
that's right.
That's what makes me feel like, oh, I'm having to learn something all over again.
Yeah. So talk about, and I know that CCSSO is heard from state chiefs who are looking for, what's the policies, what's the best way.
Yeah.
So talk about the focus CCSSO.
Yeah, I mean we've done a lot of putting out the papers or the policies that states have put out around like what's your AI policy. But what we'll be doing next week in our conference in Phoenix is we are bringing in a group called Day of AI, and the idea is to actually have people have hands-on experience with some of these tools, because writing the policy and understanding how it's being used and actually experiencing it firsthand, we think go hand in hand. And so those policies are not just a one and done thing. Like we know that we're going to have to continue to evolve them as AI evolves. So we'll do a lot of work hands-on so that we can help chiefs be better informed about how to use AI. And I have I've been dabbling in AI, and I wanted to share something with you about AI, but it's, how might we improve efficiencies in SEAs with AI? I think there's a real frontier for that. So those are a couple of streams of work that we're looking at. But there's a AI called Notebook LM. It'll do a podcast for you, Tom.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you just put all the text in there, and then they have these two people. You can tell them what kind of people you want, and they'll do the podcast. So I think you're going to be out of a job here.
Wow. Yeah, we'll have to try that.
I will not be nearly as entertaining as
right.
you.
That's right.
There's a human element here that really matters.
Yeah. I thought you were going to tell me that you're just going to have AI write the AI policy for states.
Well, you could, but that would be an interesting, like anything with AI, you've got to like have the check on it. But what can we use it for to streamline the things that then allow us to have bigger conversations and more deep thinking about the things that really require it?
Yeah.
So
that's fascinating. A lot of educators and education leaders are concerned about how it impacts, classrooms, and specifically, the easy one to be concerned about is writing. Yeah. Right, and plagiarism and things like that. And I'm assuming states are asking lots of questions and seeing what other ideas are out there.
Yeah, so I actually attended a training myself because I felt like I needed to get a little more into it. But I think what's important is to have clear guidelines. So a lot of schools are coming out with like 5 tiers of how and when you can use AI. Like this project, you can use AI from start to finish. This project, you can only use AI to check it after you've written it. You can use AI, and so that there will be different ways in which you can engage with it. And I think those are the kinds of policies that are going to be most useful, because the all or nothing really doesn't get into the nuance of like still teaching kids to write and doing that. So we're seeing a lot of some innovative ways of working through that.
Well, fascinating, and so glad that you spent some time with us here.
Yeah.
And okay, we're going to pause now so you can do edit, because I forgot to tell you. This isn't a gotcha, but we'll edit this part out. But I always ask the guests
the most interesting thing about their home state.
Yeah, there you go. So which one are you going to do? Nebraska?
I'm going to do Nebraska.
Nebraska? Okay.
He told me out there. So.
Okay, all right. Well then, you ready for me just to jump back in? And Carissa, before we let you go, we always ask our guests to share with us one piece of trivia or information about their home state that might be interesting or something that most people don't know.
Most people don't know. Well, so I grew up in Nebraska.
Okay.
I think most people know, though, that Nebraska is a unicameral. It's the only state.
No, I suspect that might be news to some people. So talk about that.
Yeah, it's one body. It's not a Senate and a House. It's one body that represents the people of Nebraska.
So you have in most states.
And I left Nebraska thinking that's kind of how every other state was. So that was.
And you came to Idaho and found out we don't only have a governor, but a House and a Senate. And you have to get something through both of them.
That's right.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, that is a piece of trivia.
Yeah, there is. Nebraska has also won 5 national championships in football, which, according to their website, is the most of any. I'm sure someone's going to tell me at this stage.
I'm sure
that's
there's
not
5 or 6 different universities that say the same thing on their website.
I got to live in the glory days for Nebraska because it's not looking so good.
That's right. And Well, that's fascinating information, all of that, and I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Appreciate our friendship and all the things, our opportunity to work together in Idaho, and now the great work that you're doing across the country with in your work with CCSSO.
Well, I'll say publicly, thank you for your service to Idaho, Tom. It was a pleasure to serve with you.
Well, that means a lot to me. Thanks for being on the podcast. Thanks,
Thank
Carissa.
you.
All right. And folks, we'll be back for another podcast. Just cut all that out. Just end with a handshake. End with a handshake. Thank you for listening. And remember, our children may only be 22% of our population, but they represent 100% of our future. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on your favorite podcast platform. Swimming Upstream is part of the Strategos Podcast Network. To view the entire lineup of our shows, visit our website, strategosgroup.com.